My daughter-in-law banned me from seeing my grandkids for 7 years. She called me toxic and laughed when I showed up to court all alone. But when the judge opened the file and read her own messages out loud, everything turned in my favor. My visitation rights were granted on the spot, and my grandkids ran into my arms while she stared at the floor. If you're feeling this story already, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories like this, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your stories too. My name is Margaret Hayes, and I am 64 years old. For most of my life, I worked as a librarian, but the greatest joy in my world has always been my family. My son Michael grew up to be a hardworking man, and when he married Brittany, I was hopeful that our family would grow stronger. I became a grandmother to 2 beautiful children, Lily and Ethan, and from the moment I held them, my life had a new meaning. In the early years, my home was their second home. Lily loved to help me bake cookies, standing on a little stool beside me while she stirred the batter. Ethan loved to play in my backyard, running through the grass with his toy trucks while I watched from the porch. We read books together, planted flowers, and shared countless bedtime stories. Every laugh and every hug felt like a gift I would treasure forever. But things began to change when Brittany started to look at me differently. She often told me I was old-fashioned. She criticized the way I cared for the children, saying I spoiled them with too much love. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just differences in parenting styles, but the words began to sting. One afternoon, I asked if I could take Lily and Ethan to the park. Brittany crossed her arms and said coldly, "They don't need your toxic influence. You've had your time." Her words stunned me. Toxic. The word echoed in my mind. I had spent years giving every ounce of my love to these children, and suddenly, I was being painted as a danger. At first, I thought it was just an argument. I believed it would pass. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. My calls went unanswered. My letters were returned unopened. Michael avoided the subject whenever I tried to talk to him, caught between his wife and his mother. What was meant to be a short separation stretched into years of silence. 7 years. 7 long years without seeing my grandchildren. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. I watched the seasons change through the window, each one a painful reminder of the hugs I was missing. Still, I never stopped loving them. I kept their photos in frames around my house. I baked cookies, even when no one was there to eat them, just so the smell of those memories wouldn't fade. I never let go of the hope that one day I would hold them again. And then, everything changed the day I decided I could not stay silent anymore. The days without my grandchildren turned into years, and each one cut a little deeper than the last. At first, I thought Brittany's anger would fade, and she would eventually let me see Lily and Ethan again. But instead of softening, her walls only grew higher. Every birthday card I sent came back to my mailbox, unopened, and stamped, "Return to sender." Christmas gifts I carefully picked out for the kids were left outside my door by Michael, who could barely look me in the eye. I tried to tell myself they were busy, that maybe things would change with time, but deep down, I knew Brittany had made her choice. She wanted me erased from their lives. And Michael, my only son, stayed silent because he didn't want to fight his wife. That silence hurt almost as much as Brittany's cruelty. The hardest part was not knowing if Lily and Ethan remembered me. I wondered if they still thought about the cookies we used to bake, the stories I used to read, or the garden where they once picked flowers with me. I worried that in 7 years their memories of me had faded into nothing. The thought of becoming a stranger to them was unbearable. One afternoon, a friend who worked at the local elementary school told me she overheard Lily talking to her teacher. Lily had said, "I miss my grandma's hugs." Those simple words broke me and healed me at the same time. They broke me because I realized my grandkids felt the same emptiness I did, but they healed me because I finally knew I had not been forgotten. They still loved me, even after all these years. That was the moment I decided I could not wait any longer. I was done crying in silence, done hoping Brittany would have a change of heart. I needed to fight for my grandchildren. I began to research my rights and learned that grandparents could file for visitation in certain cases. It would not be easy, and I did not have the money for a lawyer, but I knew I had to try. When I filed the paperwork at the courthouse, My hands were shaking. It felt strange to write down in legal documents something so personal, something that should have been built on love and trust instead of court orders. But as I signed my name, I thought of Lily and Ethan's faces and found the strength to keep going. The first hearing was scheduled, and I remember walking into the courtroom feeling completely alone. I wore my best dress, carried a simple folder with photos, letters, and old messages that showed the bond I had with my grandchildren. I was nervous, but determined. When Brittany walked in, she looked like she was walking onto a runway. She wore an expensive suit, her hair perfectly styled, and behind her were two lawyers carrying thick binders. She caught my eye and smirked, tilting her head in mock pity. "Well, this should be quick," she said under her breath as she passed by me. "You really think the judge will side with you?" Pathetic. I clenched my folder tighter, but said nothing. I wasn't there to trade insults. I was there for Lily and Ethan. As we sat down, I could feel the imbalance of power. She had a legal team, money, and confidence. I had only myself, my truth, and a stack of memories in my hands. I could hear whispers from people in the courtroom benches, some even chuckling at how uneven it looked. It would have been easy to feel small, but I kept reminding myself why I was there. When the judge entered, the room grew quiet. The case was called, and we both stood. Brittany's lawyers spoke first, painting me as an unstable influence who caused stress in the children's lives. They used words like toxic and unfit, the same words Brittany had thrown at me for years. Each word pierced me, but I held my head high, waiting for my turn. Finally, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "you may present your side." I stood, my knees trembling, and opened my folder. My voice wavered at first, but I steadied it with each sentence. I told the judge about the years I had cared for my grandchildren, the hours spent reading, baking, and loving them. I showed photos of Lily covered in flour at the kitchen counter, Ethan grinning with dirt on his face from the garden, birthday parties where they blew out candles at my dining table. I held up letters I had written that were returned unopened, proof that I had tried to stay in their lives even when blocked. The judge flipped through the documents, nodding. Then he picked up a separate file that had been submitted, one I had not seen yet. My heart raced as he opened it. Brittany looked confident, crossing her arms as if she already knew the outcome. What happened next would change everything. When the judge opened that file, I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. My palms were damp, and I clutched the edge of my folder as if it were the only thing keeping me steady. I had walked into that courtroom alone, without lawyers or polished arguments, but I had walked in with truth. Still, truth felt so fragile in that moment, standing against Brittany's confidence and her expensive legal team. The judge's glasses slid down his nose as he read silently for a few moments. Then he looked up, his expression stern, and said, "I will now read from several messages submitted into evidence." My stomach dropped. I hadn't submitted anything beyond photos, letters, and small pieces of proof. That meant these messages had come from somewhere else, possibly from Michael. Brittany shifted in her chair, still smug, but I noticed a flicker of worry cross her face. The judge cleared his throat and began reading. "She is toxic. I'll make sure she never sees them again." His voice was steady and firm, echoing through the silent courtroom. "I don't care if it hurts the kids. They don't need her. I will erase her from their lives." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. My breath caught as tears filled my eyes, but I held them back. I didn't want to give Brittany the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I stood taller, my heart both breaking and strengthening at the same time. For years, I had been accused, dismissed, and painted as someone unworthy of love. Now, in front of a judge, her very words were being laid bare. She hadn't just wanted distance. She had planned to cut me out of my grandchildren's lives entirely, regardless of their feelings. Brittany's face turned pale. She looked at her lawyers, her lips pressed tightly together, but they avoided her gaze. They knew as well as everyone else in that courtroom that those words would not be easy to explain away. The judge continued, flipping through page after page. "Her influence is dangerous because it makes the kids love her more than me." His voice grew heavier with each sentence. "If I have to, I'll lie to Michael to make sure he never takes them to her house again." Each line was another dagger, not at me, but at the mask Brittany had worn for so long. The image she had crafted of being the perfect mother, the one in control, was unraveling word by word. Finally, the judge set the file down. He looked at Brittany with a sharp, unflinching gaze. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "these are your words. Do you deny writing these messages?" For the first time since the hearing began, Brittany looked small. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting to the floor. "I was upset," she muttered. "I didn't mean it the way it sounds." The judge didn't move. "You did not write these in anger once. This is a pattern of communication over several years. These messages show intent to alienate the children from their grandmother. That is unacceptable." Silence filled the room again. I could hear my own breath, steady and strong now. For 7 years, I had been silenced. For 7 years, my love had been called toxic. And now, the truth was finally speaking for me. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Hayes," he said kindly, "your efforts to remain a part of your grandchildren's lives are clear. You sent letters, gifts, and cards that were rejected. You presented photos and memories that demonstrate a close, nurturing bond. You did not stop trying, even when you were denied." My lips trembled as I whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor." At that moment, something inside me shifted. I had walked into that courtroom afraid and small, but I realized I had always been stronger than Brittany's words. I had never given up on Lily and Ethan, and that persistence was shining through now. The judge leaned back in his chair, his decision not yet spoken, but already heavy in the air. "This court will not allow a grandmother who clearly loves and cares for her grandchildren to be erased from their lives. Visitation rights are not only appropriate, they are necessary." My knees nearly gave out from relief. Brittany's shoulders slumped, her eyes fixed on the floor. The confidence she had worn so proudly at the start of the hearing was gone. I held my folder against my chest, the tears I had been holding back finally slipping down my cheeks. Not tears of defeat, but tears of hope. After 7 years of loneliness, after endless nights wondering if my grandchildren even remembered me, the path back to them was opening. And in that moment, I knew this was the turning point. I was no longer the grandmother begging for scraps of time. I was the grandmother who had fought, who had stood alone in court, and who had finally been heard. The judge's words seemed to hang in the air for a long moment. Visitation rights are not only appropriate, they are necessary. I felt my whole body loosen, as if 7 years of tension had suddenly released all at once. For so long, I had lived with the fear that the court might side with Brittany, that I might walk out of that room empty-handed once again. But now, I was being told that I mattered, that my bond with Lily and Ethan mattered. The gavel struck, sealing the decision. My legs wobbled, but I stood tall. I glanced at Brittany. Her head was bent, her eyes locked on the table as if she could make herself invisible. The proud, mocking smile she had worn when she walked into the courtroom was gone. In its place was silence, the kind of silence that comes when there is nothing left to say. Michael was sitting a few rows back, his expression heavy with guilt. He hadn't spoken much during the hearing, but when the judge read Brittany's messages, I saw his face fall. Now, he looked at me with a mixture of shame and relief. Our eyes met for a second, and I could see the apology he didn't yet know how to put into words. The first visitation was scheduled only a week later. That week felt like a lifetime. I spent the days preparing in small ways, even though I knew children didn't care about fancy things. I baked Lily's favorite chocolate chip cookies. I washed the quilt Ethan used to curl up under when he napped at my house. I dusted off the photo albums, unsure if they would remember the faces and moments inside. Mostly, I tried to calm my nerves. What if they were distant? What if 7 years had built a wall too high to climb? When the day finally came, I stood in the visitation center's waiting room, my hands trembling as I clutched my purse. I could hear children's voices echoing faintly from the hallway, and with every step closer, my heart raced faster. Then the door opened. Lily was the first to appear. She was taller than I remembered, her long hair pulled back in a braid, her eyes so much like her father's. Ethan followed right behind her, his little face rounder now, his legs longer, but his grin still the same. For a split second, they both stopped, staring at me as if unsure if I was real. Then it happened. "Grandma!" Lily cried out, her voice breaking. She ran toward me so fast that her shoes slapped the floor. Ethan shouted, "Grandma!" too, his small legs carrying him as quickly as he could. I dropped to my knees, tears flooding my vision as their arms wrapped around me. They clung to me so tightly, I thought I would never breathe again, but I didn't care. I held them both, kissing their hair, their cheeks, their little hands. My whole body shook as sobs poured out of me, years of loneliness melting away in an instant. "I missed you so much," Lily whispered into my ear, her small voice trembling. "I missed you too, baby," I choked out, kissing the top of her head. Ethan pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes wide. "Why did you go away, Grandma?" That question pierced me. I swallowed hard and stroked his cheek. "I never left you, sweetheart. I wanted to be with you every day, but sometimes grown-ups make decisions that aren't fair. What matters is, I'm here now, and I'll never stop loving you." They both hugged me tighter, as if afraid I might disappear again. My tears soaked into their clothes, but I didn't care. In that moment, the 7 years of pain, the courtroom battles, the loneliness, all of it was worth it just to feel their little arms around me again. I glanced up for a moment and saw Brittany standing near the doorway, her arms crossed. She wasn't gloating anymore. She wasn't smirking. She stood still, her eyes on the floor, as if the weight of her own choices was finally pressing down on her. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. The truth had spoken louder than anything she might have tried to argue. Michael stood a few steps behind her, watching quietly. He wiped his face with his hand, and then gave me a small nod. It wasn't much, but it was something. A promise that maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to see things clearly. I sat on the floor with Lily and Ethan for the rest of the hour, telling stories, holding their hands, and listening to them chatter about school, friends, and everything I had missed. They showed me drawings they had made, little stick figures of them holding hands with me. My heart swelled so much it hurt. When the visit ended, they clung to me again, tears in their eyes. "Don't go, Grandma," Ethan pleaded. "I'll see you again soon," I promised, brushing his hair back. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of us being together again." As they were led back toward the hallway, both turned to wave at me one last time, their faces glowing with the kind of joy that only love can bring. I stayed kneeling on the floor long after they left, my hands pressed to my chest, where I could still feel their warmth. The room was quiet, but inside me, everything was alive again. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't erased. I was Grandma again. When I walked out of that visitation center, the sunlight felt different on my face. For 7 years, I had carried the weight of being unwanted, of being called toxic, of being erased from the lives of the 2 children who meant the world to me. But that day, as their little voices calling me Grandma echoed in my ears, I realized I had carried something stronger all along: hope. The drive home was quiet, but my mind was alive with every detail of our reunion. The way Lily's braid swung behind her as she ran to me, the way Ethan's small arms clung around my neck, the way they smelled of crayons and cookies. It was as if the years apart had vanished in that single moment, even though I knew they had left their scars. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the same quilt spread across my lap that Ethan once used for naps. I let my tears fall freely, not from sadness this time, but from relief. I thought about the empty holidays, the unanswered letters, the silence of birthdays where I blew out candles alone. All those years of heartbreak had led to this victory, and while I could never get those years back, I could make sure the years ahead were filled with love. Michael came by the next day. For a moment, when I opened the door, I wasn't sure what to expect. He stood there awkwardly, his hands shoved in his pockets like a boy caught doing something wrong. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "I owe you an apology. I should have defended you. I should have fought harder." I reached out and took his hand. "Michael, I can't change the past, and neither can you. What matters is that you see it now, and I forgive you. You're still my son, and I'll always love you." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy I had raised, the boy who used to look at me with trust and admiration. That gave me peace. As for Brittany, she never spoke to me after the court hearing. She avoided my eyes during the visits, her sharp tongue quieted by the judge's ruling and the truth of her own words. I don't know if she ever felt remorse, but I no longer needed her approval. My focus was on Lily and Ethan, on being present in their lives again, no matter how Brittany felt. Over the following months, I built new memories with my grandchildren. We went back to baking cookies together, this time with Lily leading the way. Ethan helped me plant flowers in the garden again, proudly announcing that his were Grandma's flowers. I framed their new drawings and placed them on my walls. The laughter in my home returned, and with it, so did my purpose. But this story isn't only about me. It's about the strength we often forget we have when life pushes us down. It's about the power of persistence when the world tells you to give up. For 7 years, I was painted as toxic, erased, and left out. But I never stopped loving, and I never stopped hoping. That love became my strength, and that strength carried me to the day when justice was finally done. The lesson I want to share is simple. Never underestimate the quiet fight of a heart that refuses to let go. You may feel small, outnumbered, or mocked for standing alone, but if your cause is rooted in love and truth, your perseverance can move mountains. Family is not something that should be erased because of bitterness or control. Family is meant to be nurtured, even when it's hard, and children deserve the love of every person who truly cares for them. If you are ever told you are unworthy, remember that love speaks louder than lies. Today, when Lily and Ethan wrap their arms around me, I feel not just like their grandmother. I feel like a survivor. I survived heartbreak, I survived loneliness, and I survived being silenced. And now, my voice, my love, and my presence are back where they belong, with them. So yes, I lost 7 years, but I gained something greater. The knowledge that no wall built on lies can stand forever. Truth finds its way out. And love, when it's real, always wins in the end. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more true stories like this, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences.